Supreme Commander Corvus would regret his arrogant order for the Evora fleet to invade Earth and enslave its people, not knowing humanity had developed a top-secret weapon that would make the aliens yearn for the swift release of death. The Evora Armada's devastating technological superiority allowed them to effortlessly shatter Earth's orbital defenses and crush its meager military forces. Troop transport ships descended through the atmosphere, disgorging heavily armed Evora soldiers into Earth's major cities, rounding up the defenseless human population. Dr. Eric Brown, an eccentric but brilliant government scientist, watched in despair as reports of the alien invasion and mass imprisonment of humans flooded in. He raced to his hidden underground lab, the location of humanity's last hope, a superweapon harnessing unimaginable destructive power from a parallel universe. Eric started up the weapon's firing sequence with shaking hands, praying it would function as designed and not tear apart the very fabric of space-time. On the Evora flagship, threat indicators wailed as a tremendous energy surge was detected on the planet's surface. But before the alien commander could react, an incandescent lance of blinding white energy erupted from the Earth, spearing through a dozen Evora battleships like a hot knife through butter. The beam sliced the massive vessels apart effortlessly, leaving glowing trails of vaporized hull metal. Supreme Commander Corvus bellowed orders for the fleet to target the human weapon with everything they had. Disruptor beams, antimatter warheads, and graviton pulses bombarded the planet, but impossibly the human device remained unscathed, protected by shimmering force fields that absorbed the Evora barrage harmlessly. Eric picked himself up off the floor of his lab, ears ringing, and stared in amazement at the weapon's displays. Power output was at maximum, and it was fully operational. Humanity had done the impossible. Now, the battle to drive the alien invaders from Earth could begin in earnest. This was humanity's darkest hour, but also its moment of greatest potential triumph against a merciless galactic empire bent on humanity's subjugation or extinction. The Evora would soon learn to regret their arrogant dismissal of the human race. They would regret their cruelty, their greed, and their blind aggression. But most of all, the alien invaders would regret not doing their homework and underestimating humanity's ingenuity, tenacity, and sheer determination to survive at any cost. That would be their last and gravest mistake. Eric grits his teeth, forcing his battered body to stand as he takes aim with the damaged superweapon. He pulls the trigger, praying for a miracle. The device hums and vibrates in his hands, then unleashes a crackling beam of energy that lances into the sky, piercing another Evora battleship. The alien vessel explodes, raining molten debris onto the battlefield below. Corvus roars with rage, his eyes blazing with hatred. He barks orders into his comms, his voice dripping with menace. Within moments, a swarm of dropships descends from the Evora fleet, disgorging hordes of heavily armed shock troopers. They charge across the ravaged landscape, their weapons spitting plasma bolts and searing laser beams. Eric's fingers dance over the weapon's controls, hurriedly activating the lab's automated defense grid. Sentry turrets emerge from concealed bunkers, their targeting systems locking onto the advancing Evora. The air fills with the deafening chatter of railguns and the sizzling hiss of laser cannons as the turrets open fire, mowing down the alien soldiers in droves. But the Evora keep coming, heedless of their mounting casualties. They throw themselves at the lab's blast doors, setting breaching charges and hammering at the reinforced metal with plasma cutters. Eric knows it's only a matter of time before they break through. He turns his attention back to the superweapon, his hands flying over its interface as he tries to stabilize its power output. Sparks fly from ruptured conduits, and warning alerts flash across cracked display screens, but Eric ignores them all, single-minded in his persistence. Suddenly, a shimmer of distorted light catches Eric's eye. He peers into the swirling dust clouds, his heart sinking as he spots a cloaked Evora stealth shuttle touching down on the outskirts of the battle. The hatch slides open, revealing the imposing figure of Supreme Commander Corvus himself, flanked by a cadre of elite warriors. Corvus strides forward, his armor gleaming with advanced force shielding. His troops fan out behind him, armed with devastating plasma cannons and portable shield generators of their own. They advance methodically, blasting apart the lab's outer defenses with ruthless efficiency. Eric knows he's out of time. With a final desperate keystroke, he completes the weapon's power sequence and aims it directly at Corvus and his approaching squad. The device thrums with barely restrained energy, its barrel glowing white-hot. A searing lance of blinding light erupts from the weapon, sweeping across the battlefield like the finger of an angry god. Evora soldiers are vaporized instantly, their ashes swirling away on the scorching winds. The beam slams into Corvus's shield, the alien commander staggering under the onslaught, but still advancing step by inexorable step. Eric cranks the weapon to full power, the beam intensifying until it seems to ignite the very air. Corvus's shield flares and flickers, then finally collapses in a burst of crackling energy, but the Evora keep coming, heedless of the destruction being unleashed upon them. High above, the surviving Evora ships open fire with every weapon at their disposal, pouring a ceaseless barrage of plasma bolts and antimatter warheads onto Eric's position. The Earth quakes and bucks under the onslaught, the lab vanishing in a massive fireball that sends Eric and Corvus tumbling like jackstraws. Eric rolls to his feet, his head ringing and his vision swimming. The superweapon still rests in his hands, but it's been badly damaged, reduced to sputtering weak spurts of unstable energy. He looks up to see Corvus limping towards him, the alien's armor blackened and half-slagged, but his eyes still burning with primal fury. Corvus unsheathes a wicked-looking combat knife, the curved blade humming with molecular disruption fields. He gestures to the handful of surviving Evora elites, directing them to circle around and flank Eric's position. Eric braces himself, raising the damaged weapon like a club. He knows this fight may be his last, but he'll be damned if he goes down easily. Earth is depending on him to buy every last second he can. The two adversaries close in, their respective forces forgotten. The entire world narrowed down to this final fateful confrontation between man and alien, between the unstoppable onslaught of a ruthless galactic empire and humanity's last desperate hope for survival. Eric swung the damaged superweapon wildly, barely deflecting Corvus's knife strike. The alien commander snarled, his eyes blazing with hatred as he pressed his advantage. Eric stumbled backwards, his arms trembling from the force of each blow. "You cannot win, human," Corvus hissed, slashing viciously. The knife's edge caught Eric's forearm, leaving a deep gash. Eric gritted his teeth against the pain, desperately searching for an opening, but Corvus was too fast, too strong. The alien's fist slammed into Eric's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. As Eric doubled over, gasping, Corvus raised his knife for the killing blow. Suddenly the air erupted with gunfire. Bullets pinged off Corvus's armor, forcing the alien to dive for cover. Eric looked up to see a squad of human soldiers pouring into the ruined lab, weapons blazing. "Eric, move your ass," a familiar voice shouted. Jack Reese, Eric's old friend from his military days, waved frantically from behind a chunk of fallen concrete. Eric scrambled towards Jack, clutching the superweapon to his chest. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head as Corvus's troops returned fire. Jack grabbed Eric's arm, hauling him behind cover. "Took you long enough," Eric panted, grinning despite the chaos. Jack snorted. "You're welcome, jackass. Now let's get you and that fancy gun out of here." As Jack's team laid down covering fire, they half-dragged Eric towards a waiting vehicle. Corvus bellowed orders to his troops, but the constant barrage kept the aliens pinned down. Eric caught a glimpse of the Everan commander retreating to his stealth shuttle before Jack shoved him into the resistance vehicle. The team sped away, weaving through the ruins of the city. Eric slumped in his seat, exhausted. "How did you find me?" Jack's eyes never left the road as he swerved to avoid debris. "We've been hit and running these bastards for weeks. When we saw that light show you put on, we figured it had to be you." They drove for hours, eventually reaching a hidden entrance in a forested hillside. The vehicle descended into an underground parking area filled with mismatched military and civilian vehicles. "Welcome to the rebellion," Jack said, helping Eric out of the car. Eric gaped at the bustling underground complex. Civilians and soldiers alike hurried about their tasks, many carrying salvaged alien tech. In one corner, a group huddled around a bank of jury-rigged computer screens displaying Everan troop movements. "We've been gathering survivors, scavenging what we can," Jack explained. "But that weapon of yours might be the key to turning this war around." As the engineers worked, Eric described the weapon's capabilities. One of the techs, a wiry woman with grease-stained hands, let out a low whistle. "If we can interface this with the planet's ley lines," she mused, "we could hit the bastards anywhere on Earth." Eric's eyes widened. "You know about the ley lines?" The woman nodded. "Ancient knowledge, but it checks out scientifically. We've been trying to tap into them, but lacked the power source." She patted the superweapon. "Until now." As the Resistance worked to modify the weapon, Eric received word of a massive Everan base under construction in the Rockies. The aliens had burrowed deep into a mountain, creating a fortress to direct their global occupation. Eric leaned over a holographic map, pointing out key structural weaknesses. "If we can get inside and plant charges here, here, and here," he said, "we can bring the whole thing down on their heads." Jack nodded grimly. "It's a suicide mission, but if it works—" "It has to work," Eric said firmly. "We may not get another shot at this." Using stolen Everan stealth tech, Eric, Jack, and a small team infiltrated the mountain base. They moved swiftly through the alien corridors, planting demolition charges at critical junctures. Just as Eric was about to trigger the explosives, alarms blared throughout the facility. Everan troops poured into the chamber, led by a stern-faced alien Eric didn't recognize. "I am Zelos," the alien announced smugly, "and you humans have walked right into my trap." Eric's team found themselves surrounded, energy weapons trained on them from all sides. But even as Zelos gloated, Eric felt a tremor run through the floor beneath his feet. The alien's eyes widened in sudden realization, but it was too late. Eric had already activated the superweapon, channeling its power through the ley lines. The mountain shook violently as geysers of blinding energy erupted from the ground, vaporizing Everan soldiers where they stood. Eric and his team ran for their lives as the base crumbled around them. They emerged into the open air just as a massive explosion tore through the mountain. All across the globe, pillars of light burst from the earth, striking Everan strongholds with pinpoint accuracy. As the light faded, Eric stared at the devastation in awe. The Everan's hold on Earth had been shattered in a single decisive blow, but he knew the war was just the beginning. The real battle had only just begun. The celebration was short-lived. As the dust settled from their victory, Eric watched grimly as Corvus rallied the remaining Evora forces. The alien commander established a new stronghold in the ruins of what was once Kansas City, fortifying it with salvaged weaponry and orbital defenses. Zelos sulked in Corvus's shadow, relegated to overseeing supply chains and logistics. But Eric knew the cunning alien wouldn't stay quiet for long. He'd be waiting for any opportunity to seize power. The Resistance barely had time to catch their breath before the skies lit up with fire. Evora ships rained death from orbit, targeting every suspected human hideout. Eric huddled with the others in their underground bunker as the earth shook above them. The bombardment lasted for days. When it finally stopped, Eric emerged to survey the devastation. Entire cities reduced to ash and rubble. He clenched his fists, knowing they couldn't keep fighting like this forever. "We need to take the fight to them," Eric announced to the gathered Resistance leaders. "Their homeworld, it's the only way." Eric laid out his audacious plan. They'd steal an Evora ship capable of interstellar travel. It was their only shot at striking at the heart of the alien empire. For weeks they pored over stolen Evora data, searching for a weakness. Finally they found it, a hidden shipyard deep in the Amazon rainforest. A small freighter was scheduled for resupply, destined to return to Evora space. The journey to reach it was hell. Eric, Jack, and a small team slogged through dense jungle, swatting at insects and keeping watch for Evora drones. They lost 2 men to quicksand, another to a venomous snake. Food ran low, water even lower. After what felt like an eternity, they crested a ridge and saw it. A massive crater carved into the earth, ringed by shimmering force fields. The shipyard. Jack's team struck the main gate, unleashing a barrage of stolen Evora weapons. Alarms blared as security forces scrambled to respond. Eric used the chaos to slip inside, making a beeline for the docked freighter. He found the ship's crew already dead, sprawled across the deck in pools of purple blood. A trap. Eric's blood ran cold as he recognized Zelos's handiwork. Before he could warn the others, Evora troops poured into the hangar. Eric dove for cover as plasma bolts sizzled past. He was pinned down, cut off from escape. Zelos's mocking voice crackled over the comms. "I've been waiting for this, human. Your pathetic resistance ends here." Eric's mind raced, searching for a way out. Suddenly the deck beneath him lurched. The freighter's gravity plating overloaded, hurling massive cargo containers through the air like cannonballs. Evora soldiers scattered, crushed by the onslaught. Eric seized his chance. He sprinted for the ship's cockpit, frantically working to hotwire the engines. The ship rumbled to life just as Zelos's troops regrouped. With a roar of engines, Eric brought the main thrusters online. A torrent of superheated plasma erupted from the engines, incinerating the Evora forces. The last thing Eric saw was Zelos's face, contorted in fury, as the freighter tore free of its moorings and rocketed skyward. They barely cleared the atmosphere before Evora interceptors gave chase. Eric pushed the battered freighter to its limits, dodging energy beams and missiles. He punched in a randomized jump sequence, praying it would work. For agonizing days they played cat and mouse through the void of space. Just when it seemed their luck had run out, the freighter's wormhole drive engaged. In a flash of impossible light, they vanished from Earth's solar system. Eric allowed himself a moment of triumph. They'd done it. They'd taken the fight to Evora space, but that elation was short-lived. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship. The hyperdrive was failing, pushed beyond its limits by their desperate escape. Eric fought with the controls, searching for any habitable world to set down on. A crimson planet loomed ahead, their only option. Eric gritted his teeth as he guided the freighter into a barely controlled descent. They hit the atmosphere hard, the ship groaning and shuddering. With a bone-jarring impact, they slammed into an endless sea of red sand. As the dust settled, Eric took stock of their situation. They were stranded on an alien world, deep in enemy territory, but they were alive. And they had a chance, however slim, to strike at the heart of the Evora Empire. Eric turned to his battered crew. "Let's get to work, we've got an empire to bring down." Eric stepped out of the crashed freighter, his boots sinking into the crimson sand. The alien sun beat down mercilessly, its harsh light reflecting off the endless dunes. He squinted, scanning the horizon for any signs of life. "Atmosphere's breathable," Jack called out, checking a handheld scanner. "But it's hot as hell out here." The rest of the crew emerged, faces streaked with sweat and grime. Eric activated his wrist computer, frowning at the readouts. "I'm picking up faint energy signatures," he said. "Buried deep. Could be natural, could be artificial." They spent days trekking across the wasteland, rationing their dwindling supplies. The nights were bitterly cold, the days scorching. On the fourth day, Eric's scanner pinged loudly. "There," he pointed to a rocky outcropping. "The signal's strongest there." As they approached, Jack noticed an odd shimmer in the air. Some kind of cloaking tech. Eric nodded, running his hands along the rock face. His fingers found a hidden seam and a section of stone slid away, revealing a dark tunnel. "Everyone stay sharp," Eric ordered, activating his weapon's light. "We don't know what we're walking into." They crept through winding passages, the air growing cooler and damper. Suddenly they emerged into a vast chamber filled with humming machinery and glowing monitors. Before they could react, energy fields sprang to life around them. Alien figures emerged from the shadows, tall and lithe with iridescent skin. "Evora," Jack hissed, raising his weapon. But these weren't soldiers. Their robes and delicate instruments marked them as scientists. An elder female stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How did you find this place?" Eric lowered his weapon slowly. "I'm Eric. We're refugees from Earth fleeing the Evora Empire's invasion. The female's eyes widened. Impossible. The Empire would never... It's true, Eric said. Your people are slaughtering mine by the millions. The scientists conferred in hushed tones. Finally, the elder turned back to Eric. I am Astria, she said, and it seems we have much to discuss. Over the next hours, Eric learned the truth. These Evora were pacifist dissidents horrified by their empire's warmongering. They'd fled here to conduct secret research, tapping into the planet's core for a revolutionary power source. But our work has destabilized the planet, Astria explained, her face grim. If left unchecked, it could trigger a cataclysm. Eric's mind raced. You said this was once the Evora homeworld. Astria nodded. Yes, though that knowledge has been lost to most. Our ancestors fled a similar disaster eons ago. And your people dismiss your warnings as treasonous, Eric said, the pieces falling into place. He outlined his desperate plan. Use the scientists' research to trigger a controlled cataclysm, masking their escape and striking a blow against the Empire. Astria's eyes blazed. You would destroy our ancestral home. To save Earth and expose the lie at the heart of your empire, Eric said. Yes. The choice burdened immensely on them all, but in the end they agreed it was their only option. The next days were a blur of frantic activity. Eric's crew worked alongside the Evora scientists, repairing the freighter and preparing for the coming devastation. As the ship's reactors built to overload, Astria and a handful of volunteers remained behind to ensure the energy tap reached critical mass. Good luck, she said, clasping Eric's hand. May your people find the peace we could not. The freighter blasted free of the doomed planet, red sands giving way to a sea of stars. Behind them the world fractured, great fissures spewing molten rock into the sky. Eric gritted his teeth as he executed a series of wild maneuvers, skimming past massive gas giants. The ship groaned under the strain, hull plates buckling as they rode the shockwave of a dying world. With a final surge of power, they punched through into real space. Eric sagged in his chair, exhausted but triumphant. They'd done it. They were on their way back to Earth. But even as the crew celebrated, Eric's eyes remained fixed on the starfield ahead. He knew the true test was yet to come. When Corvus learned what they'd done, his wrath would be terrible to behold. Eric clenched his fists. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. For Earth, for all those who'd sacrificed everything in the name of freedom. The freighter lurched violently as it emerged from another wormhole jump. Eric's cybernetic fingers dug into the control panel, leaving dents in the metal. Alarms blared as the ship's overtaxed systems struggled to compensate. Hull integrity at 62%, Jack reported, his voice tinged with a mechanical edge from his own augmentations. We can't keep this up much longer. Eric's augmented eyes scanned the readouts, processing information at inhuman speeds. One more jump, we have to risk it. The ship shuddered as they plunged into a swirling ion cloud. Lightning arced across the viewports, systems flickering wildly. With a deafening crack, the engines died. We're losing altitude, Eric shouted. Brace for impact. The freighter plummeted through the atmosphere of a barren world, trailing fire and debris. Eric's enhanced reflexes allowed him to wrestle some control from the dying ship, guiding it toward a vast, rocky plain. They hit hard, skidding across the lifeless surface. When the dust settled, Eric pulled himself from the wreckage, his cybernetic limbs whirring as they self-repaired. The crew emerged, battered but alive thanks to their augmentations. As they assessed the damage, Eric's built-in scanner picked up a faint energy signature. There, he pointed, his arm transforming into a high-powered scope. Underground, artificial. They trekked across the desolate landscape, following the signal. Eric's enhanced senses detected a hidden entrance, camouflaged among the rocks. The team descended into darkness, activating night vision implants. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber filled with ancient machinery and weapons beyond their comprehension. An Evora research facility, Eric mused, interfacing directly with nearby consoles, abandoned centuries ago. A blur of motion caught his eye. Eric's combat subroutines engaged automatically, his body pivoting to face the threat. A monstrous figure lunged from the shadows, part Evora, part machine. Weapons sprouted from its body like grotesque appendages. "Intruder detected," it growled in a voice like grinding metal. "Termination protocols engaged." Eric's team scattered as the cyborg unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. Their own augmentations allowed them to move within human speed, but this creature was on another level entirely. Orcs? Eric's neural implants supplied the name as he analyzed the attacker's capabilities. Prototype Evora super soldier. Eric's arm reconfigured into a plasma cannon, returning fire. The two augmented warriors clashed in a fury of energy discharges and razor-sharp blades. For agonizing minutes they battled through the facility. Eric's team struggled to keep up, their own enhancements pushed to the limit. Finally, Eric saw an opening. He fired a concentrated electromagnetic pulse directly into Eric's neural core. The cyborg froze, systems overloading. As Eric's collapsed, Eric's hacking implants engaged. He sifted through the cyborg's fractured programming, piecing together its history and purpose. "This place," Eric announced, his voice devoid of emotion. "It holds the key to defeating the Evora." Jack stepped forward, concern evident even through his cybernetic features. "Eric, we should leave, get back to Earth while we can." But Eric was already interfacing with the facility's systems. "No, we have an opportunity here to create an army capable of standing against Corvus." "At what cost?" Jack argued. "Look at what these enhancements are doing to us." Eric turned, his eyes glowing with an inhuman light. "Whatever it takes to win. Arix, initiate integration protocols for the team." As Arix complied, Eric felt the last vestiges of his humanity slipping away. But he embraced the cold logic of his new existence. They would save Earth, no matter the price. The freighter rose from the planet's surface days later, its crew transformed into something no longer entirely human. Eric stood at the helm, his mind interfaced directly with the ship's systems. They set course for Earth, leaving behind the empty husk of the research facility. In the cargo hold, prototype weapons and cybernetic components waited to be unleashed upon Corvus's forces. Eric's augmented mind calculated the odds of victory, factoring in their new capabilities. For the first time since the war began, the numbers favored humanity's survival. But as stars streaked past the viewports, a nagging doubt persisted in what remained of Eric's organic brain. Had they truly found salvation, or merely traded one form of extinction for another? The captured Evora freighter lurched through space, its hull pockmarked with battle scars. Inside, Eric stood at the command console, his cybernetic eyes flickering with streams of data. The invasive Evora implants pulsed beneath his skin, whispering dark calculations into his mind. "Sir, we've detected multiple contacts," Jack reported, his voice tinged with a mechanical undertone. "Evora stealth destroyers, closing fast." Eric's lips curled into a cold smile. "Corvus sent his new attack dog. Good." The freighter rocked as energy blasts slammed into its shields. Eric's augmented brain processed tactical options at lightning speed. He turned to his crew, each member now more machine than human. As the freighter's engines screamed in protest, Eric led his team to the teleportation chamber. The air crackled with ozone as the singularity drive spun up, tearing a hole in space-time. In a flash of blinding light, Eric and his cyborg soldiers materialized inside the Evora flagship. Alarms blared as they stormed through the corridors, their cybernetic limbs propelling them at inhuman speeds. Evora crewmen fell before the onslaught, their bodies shredded by plasma fire and experimental bioweapons. Eric's team moved with ruthless efficiency, guided by the ship's schematics downloaded directly into their neural networks. On the bridge, Operative Zelash barked orders, his iridescent skin gleaming under the emergency lights. The door exploded inward, and Eric strode through the smoke. Zelash's eyes widened in shock. "What abomination is this?" Eric's arm reconfigured, sprouting a vicious railgun. Your doom. The two clashed in a fury of cybernetic enhancements and alien technology. Consoles exploded around them as they traded blows, their augmented bodies pushing past normal limits. Zelash's tentacles lashed out, seeking vulnerabilities in Eric's defenses, but the human's cold logic predicted each move, countering with brutal precision. With a final desperate lunge, Eric drove his railgun arm through Zelash's torso. The Evora operative gasped, purple blood bubbling from his lips. You've become the very thing you sought to destroy, Zelash choked out. Eric's eyes flashed. No, I've become what's necessary to win. As Zelash's lifeless body slumped to the deck, Eric turned to the terrified bridge crew. Plot a course for the Evora homeworlds now. While his team secured the ship, Eric interfaced with its weapons systems. He accessed the bioweapon payload, unleashing a cyber pathogen that raced through subspace channels. Across Evora-controlled space, chaos erupted. Defense grids failed, supply lines crumbled, and entire star systems fell silent. In his opulent command center, Corvus received the chilling transmission. Eric's cybernetically enhanced visage filled the screens, his voice cold and merciless. "Surrender now, or watch your empire burn," Eric intoned. "This is but a taste of the apocalypse we will rain upon you." Eric's fingers danced across the weapons controls, inputting Zelash's command codes. The planetary shields fell, leaving the surface exposed. "Target the capital," Eric ordered, his voice devoid of hesitation or remorse. Incendiary plasma rained down upon the Evora world. Skyscrapers toppled, and streets ran molten. The cybernetic virus wormed its way into every system, leaving only death and dysfunction in its wake. As the fires raged below, Eric broadcast his ultimatum to the stunned Evora leadership. His augmented eyes gleamed with cold triumph, reflecting the inferno he had unleashed. "Your empire ends here," Eric declared. "Surrender or watch every world burn." The destroyer's engines flared to life, carrying Eric and his cyborg army deeper into Evora space. Behind them, a once thriving world lay in ruins, the first casualty in humanity's campaign of terror against their would-be conquerors. The captured Evora destroyer cut through space, its engines pulsing with stolen power. Eric stood at the helm, his cybernetic eyes scanning tactical readouts as they approached their next target. "Shipyard in range," Jack reported, his voice cold and mechanical. "Defenses are active but scattered." Eric nodded, interfacing directly with the ship's weapons systems. "Execute attack pattern Omega-3. The destroyer banked hard, unleashing a barrage of plasma torpedoes. They streaked across the void, detonating against the shipyard's outer defenses in a series of blinding explosions. Alarms blared as Evora fighters scrambled to intercept, but Eric's augmented reflexes allowed him to outmaneuver them with ease. The destroyer's pulse cannons spat death, shredding enemy ships into clouds of debris. A precision strike reduced the array to molten slag, severing the shipyard's long-range communications. Eric's lips curled into a cold smile as he watched chaos unfold across enemy channels. "They're blind," he said. "Push forward, hit the dry docks." So the destroyer plunged deeper into the fray, its modified shields shrugging off return fire. Eric's team worked in perfect sync, their cybernetic implants allowing instantaneous coordination. As they decimated another Evora installation, proximity warnings flashed. A massive battle cruiser dropped out of warp, its weapons already charging. "Evasive maneuvers," Eric barked. The destroyer rolled, narrowly avoiding a searing lance of energy. Eric's fingers danced across the controls, plotting a new course. "We've done enough damage here," he said. "Prepare for wormhole jump." Space twisted as they tore open a rift, escaping just as the battlecruiser unleashed another volley. They emerged in a new system, leaving destruction in their wake. Eric interfaced with the ship's long-range scanners, searching for their next target. His augmented mind processed tactical data at inhuman speeds. "There," he said, highlighting a distant star cluster. "A nomadic merchant fleet, We'll use them to mask our movements. The destroyer set course, its engines thrumming with stolen Evora technology. As they closed in on the unsuspecting merchants, Eric felt a flicker of something, hesitation. He pushed it aside, focusing on the cold logic of his mission. "Prepare boarding parties," he ordered. "We take those ships intact." Hours later, Eric stood on the bridge of a commandeered merchant vessel, surrounded by terrified Evora civilians. His cyborg soldiers herded them into cargo holds, weapons at the ready. "Please," an elderly Evora begged. "We're not warriors, we have families." Eric cut him off with a gesture. "You'll transport my forces to our next target. Cooperate and you may yet survive this war." As the merchant fleet changed course under Eric's control, alarms suddenly blared. A massive convoy of ships dropped out of warp directly ahead, civilians fleeing the spreading chaos. Eric's augments flooded his mind with combat projections and threat assessments. He hesitated, a ghost of his former humanity rising to the surface. "Sir," Jack's voice cut through his thoughts. "We can't let them pass. They'll alert Corvus to our position." Eric closed his eyes, his cybernetic implants whirring as they processed options. When he opened them again, all trace of mercy was gone. "All ships open fire," he commanded. "Leave no survivors." Eric watched dispassionately as civilian vessels were reduced to atomic vapor. Those who managed to escape in life pods drifted helplessly in the void, their desperate transmissions filling Eric's comm channels. He shut them off, focusing instead on the coordinates of their true target, the hidden Evora shipyard complex. The fleet surged forward, leaving a graveyard of shattered ships in its wake. Eric's gaze remained fixed on the tactical display, already planning their assault on the shipyard. As they neared the cloaked moon housing the Evora facility, Eric gathered his inner circle. Holographic schematics flickered to life, detailing the complex's defenses. "We hit hard and fast," Eric explained, his voice devoid of emotion. "First wave takes out the outer defenses. Second wave teleports directly into the dry docks." "Sir, the casualties, both sides, is this truly necessary?" Eric's cybernetic eyes locked onto hers, cold and unblinking. "Necessary? No, but it is inevitable. We didn't start this war, but we will finish it, by any means required." With that, he gave the order to attack. Their ships punched through the moon's cloaking field, unleashing a devastating barrage of munitions. Explosions bloomed across the surface as dry docks were reduced to twisted metal. Eric led the boarding parties himself, his exoskeleton humming with barely contained power. They materialized inside the facility's cavernous interior, weapons already blazing. Evora defenders fell before the onslaught, unable to match the speed and precision of Eric's cyborg commandos. Railgun fire tore through bulkheads, plasma grenades reduced entire sections to slag. Eric moved through the chaos like a force of nature, his augmented senses allowing him to predict and counter every threat. Bodies of Evora workers and soldiers littered the ground in his wake. As the last pockets of resistance crumbled, Eric interfaced with the facility's systems. He began the process of harvesting wormhole data, plotting their escape route. Suddenly, proximity alarms shrieked to life. Eric's tactical display lit up with hundreds of new contacts dropping out of warp. The first salvo from the Evora Armada struck the moon's surface, sending tremors through the entire structure. Eric's augmented mind raced, calculating their odds of survival. The cloaked moon shuddered as Corvus's Armada unleashed hell. Plasma lances and anti-proton beams tore through the facility's defenses, ripping apart dry docks and docking pylons. Eric's tactical display lit up with a storm of red alerts as debris fields bloomed across the lunar surface. "Shields failing in sectors 3 through 7, a cyborg tech shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of destruction. Eric's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, rerouting power and deploying countermeasures. "All units, fall back to hardened positions," he ordered. "Activate singularity bunkers and plasma turrets." Across the shattered landscape, Eric's cyborg commandos sprinted for cover. Shimmering energy fields sprang to life as singularity-shielded bunkers materialized. Defensive turrets rose from concealed positions, spitting streams of superheated plasma at incoming Evora dropships. In his command center, Eric's augmented mind processed the flood of battlefield data. "Divert all non-essential power to the wormhole anchor nodes," he commanded. "We need those operational at all costs." Suddenly new alerts blared. Corvus had launched a full-scale boarding action. Teleportation breaches erupted across the moon's surface, disgorging waves of Evora assault troops. "Incoming!" Jack Reese's voice crackled over the comm. "They're pouring through by the hundreds." Eric watched through security feeds as his cyborg juggernauts met the Evora charge head-on. Railguns spat hypersonic slugs, shredding the first wave of attackers, but more kept coming. The lunar interior devolved into a nightmare of close-quarters combat. Powered armor legions clashed in pressurized corridors, their weapons reducing bulkheads to molten slag. Cybernetic thrall commandos leapt from shadows, only to be cut down by Eric's veteran shock troops. In a ruined hangar bay, Jack Reese stood his ground against a trio of Evora elites. His augmented reflexes allowed him to dodge plasma bolts by millimeters. Jack's arm reconfigured into a vicious chain blade, carving through alien armor and flesh with equal ease. Eric coordinated the defense from his fortified command nexus, slaving subroutines to manage logistics, while he personally optimized shield matrices against Corvus's ongoing barrage. "Status on the wormhole anchors," he demanded. Air pillar of twisted energy erupted from the moon's core, rapidly expanding to engulf entire sections of the battlefield. Eric watched in grim satisfaction as both Evora and human forces were caught in the vortex's gravitational pull, bodies crushed or scattered into the cosmic void. On his flagship, Corvus bellowed in rage as he realized Eric's gambit. "All ships, full reverse, break off the attack." But it was too late. Eric's fingers flew across the controls, sealing exit vectors and locking the vortex trajectory to an unknown vector beyond charted space. Alarms blared across Corvus's bridge as proximity warnings screamed of imminent annihilation. "Wormhole drives to maximum," Corvus roared. "Initiate slingshot protocol." As the vortex threatened to swallow his entire armada, Corvus faced an impossible choice: retreat and let the humans escape, or pursue them into the cosmic abyss. His alien features contorted with hatred as he made his decision. "All ships, follow them in," he snarled. "We end this now." The Evora armada plunged into the swirling maelstrom, vanishing in a flash of twisted light. Eric's command bunker shuddered as the last of the invaders were pulled into the vortex. He allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction before turning to face the challenges ahead. "Seal all breaches," he ordered. "Prepare for transit. We're going where no human has gone before." The remnants of Eric's forces braced themselves as the lunar facility was drawn inexorably into the cosmic wormhole. Stars streaked past viewports as they hurtled across the gulf between galaxies, pursued by the vengeful Evora armada. The wormhole's cosmic maw tore at reality itself as Eric's forces and the Evora armada plunged into the abyss. Space twisted and warped, stretching ships beyond their limits. Hull plating buckled and tore, spewing atmosphere and bodies into the void. Screams filled comm channels before cutting to static, as vessel after vessel succumbed to the impossible forces. Eric's command nexus shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared as structural integrity fields strained to their breaking point. Through the maelstrom of cascading system failures, Eric's cybernetic mind processed the carnage unfolding around him. Eric's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, rerouting power and sealing off compromised sections. His augmented senses registered Corvus's flagship still in pursuit, its energy signature burning like an angry star through the wormhole's kaleidoscopic rifts. Suddenly the deck lurched sideways. Eric stumbled, catching himself on a console. He turned to see Jack Reese sprawled nearby, the soldier's augmented torso a mess of sparking circuitry and plasma burns. Jack's eyes flickered, focusing on Eric with effort. "Sir, stabilizers. Need to—" He coughed, flecks of blood splattering his lips. Eric's cybernetic implants registered Jack's failing life signs. "Save your strength, soldier," he ordered. But Jack wasn't finished. With trembling hands, he reached for the nearby control interface. "Have to lock our trajectory," he gasped, "or we'll never make it through." Eric watched in awe as Jack poured the last of his augmented strength into the task. The ship's computer chimed, confirming the locked vector. Jack's hand fell away, his eyes going dim. Eric had no time to mourn. The wormhole's exit yawned before them, disgorging them into a realm beyond comprehension. Impossible geometries of primordial matter drifted in the void, the cosmic detritus left over from the birth of existence itself. New alarms shrieked to life as sensors detected Corvus's flagship breaching the rift behind them. Eric's mind raced, calculating vectors and possibilities. His gaze fell on a nearby planetoid of strange, ancient matter. Without hesitation, Eric interfaced directly with the ship's systems. Pain lanced through his skull as he pushed his cybernetics beyond safe limits. With a thought, he triggered a localized spatial inversion centered on the planetoid. Space rippled and tore. Concentrated bursts of Hawking radiation erupted from the planetoid's surface, triggering a chain reaction of decay. Eric watched as Corvus's flagship was caught in the expanding gravitational disruption. The Evora vessel's engines flared, straining against the effect. But it was too late. Time itself began to unravel around the doomed ship, stretching and compressing in impossible ways. Eric allowed himself one final moment of grim satisfaction as he beheld Corvus's unstoppable juggernaut, frozen in the chaos of dissolving physics. Then the full force of the singularity engulfed them all. Reality itself seemed to shatter. Eric's consciousness fragmented, each shard drinking in the impossible radiance of creation's first fire. As existence itself collapsed into a single point of infinite density, Eric's last coherent thought was a prayer that the sacrifice would be enough to save humanity from the Evora threat. Then, in a blinding flash that echoed across all possible realities, everything ceased to be. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.